Ancient Greece is a well-loved topic by many. There's a certain whimsy and nostalgia to it, in part due to how the line between history and myth becomes blurred. All thanks to the many epics imparted to us by the bards, as well as the remnants of art and architecture that were left behind by a civilization of old. Take the ancient city of Troy, for example. It's well known for being the location where a mythological battle takes place, recounted in Homer's Iliad, that for the longest time was considered just an epic passed down from bard to bard. However, in 1871, Frank Calvert, with the assistance of Heinrich Schliemann, found the ruins of Troy hidden in Hissarlik, Turkey. Ancient Greece has a long history that spans throughout centuries, starting from the early Bronze Age, circa 3000 BCE, until the end of the Hellenistic period, marked by the rise of Rome and fall of Greece, around 100 BCE. There's a lot to cover, and trust me when I say that I would love to cover it all, but today I want to focus on Greek temples, specifically the history of where they came from and what inspired them. We'll start with the downfall of the Mycenaeans. They were a thriving people of the Aegean region during the late Bronze Age, whose civilization, due to internal warfare, fell apart and collapsed. Their palaces and citadels were burnt, looted, and destroyed, 50% of the inhabited sites were left abandoned, and the population faced a sharp decline by as much as 75%. The Trojan War would take place during this time. The catastrophic downfall of the Mycenaeans marks the beginning of the geometric period, where, as a result of the devastation, the Greeks came to believe that they were living in a time after the great race of hero men, the demigods. The Greeks of this time had a unique connection with these heroes of old, making sure to always tend to their graves with offerings, reciting their deeds in poems, or even ritual meals at the gravesite. The most likely reason is because if a family has an ancestor hero buried in that land, then they have the right to own that land. If there was no ancestor who lived there, then one would be invented or even adopted and claimed as their own. As this practice grew, the memory of those heroes was used as a resource by emerging cities to bring together the community. Power shifted from individuals to civic institutions. Similarly, worship of deities, originally done either in open air or in the home of a noble, transitioned to being done by those very same civic institutions with the development of religious sanctuaries. Each city-state, or polis, had at the very least one patron deity: Athena for Athens, Ares for Sparta, Hades for Kittiros, and so on. These temples served a couple of purposes, both politically and religiously. They not only housed the city's patron gods, but also offerings, like a storehouse of sorts. They were also used to mark the city-state's territory, kind of like how hero graves gave land ownership to a family. In fact, some of those city-states had two temples, one in the center and one in the borders, and sometimes they had even more. There were also interstate shrines that functioned more as a networking ground for aristocracy, where they could both compete in sports or seek the guidance of an oracle. Two very popular interstate temples were Olympia, known for athleticism, and Delphi, known for its oracles. But what inspired the architecture behind these sanctuaries? The first shrines were made of wood and had a horseshoe-shaped base, inspired by early and Middle Bronze Age dwellings. Moving forward to the Proto-Archaic Age, trading started up again, and the Greeks established a trading colony in Egypt, where they saw sites such as Karnak or Saqqara, and the Egyptian art of sculpting a person's image in stone. There, they found inspiration. Egyptian statues were very front-facing. Usually, they depicted either a singular human figure or a group of figures generally standing straight, with the left leg slightly forward and the arms straight down and to the side, with closed fists where the thumb faced forwards. The Greeks started with this position as well, but eventually moved past it and focused on giving life to the sculpture, which included painting the sculptures and adorning them with clothing. Some of these sculptures would be made specifically to go in the now stone temples that were also inspired by the Egyptian style. In this instance, however, the Greeks prioritized proportion, symmetry, and geometry, and the two styles that emerged were the Ionic order in the Aegean Islands and the Doric order in the mainland. Generally, both styles had a similar rectangular foundation with a center room called the cella, or naos, where a statue of a deity would be placed. On both shorter sides of the cella would be porches, one being the front porch, pronaos, and one being the rear porch, known as the opisthedomos. Sometimes, the rear porch was actually an enclosed room, and sometimes it was omitted as the reason for the opisthedomos was more to keep the symmetry of the temple rather than any real practical function. Surrounding the temple, usually on all sides, is a colonnade known as the peristyle, and underneath the whole temple is a staircase with the top platform being the stylobate. The Doric order's column is a lot simpler. It has no base, and the capital, or the top of the column, has just a round finish known as the echinus. The cornice and raking cornice are simpler, but the entablature is bigger and has triglyphs in the frieze. The Ionic order, however, has these swirly things on the capital, called a volute, and an ornamental base at the bottom. The architrave has horizontal lines going through it, and the cornice and raking cornice have more details to them. The Ionic frieze is plain, giving more room for relief sculptures. Overall, the Doric order looks bulkier but simpler, whereas the Ionic order looks lighter but more ornate. Later on, during the High Classical period, the Corinthian order was created, though it's really identical to the Ionic order, with the only difference being the more decorated capital, with the stylized acanthus leaves. A slight aside, the Romans later added two column styles of their own, the Tuscan and the Composite orders. The Tuscan column is inspired by the Doric column, and the Composite column is basically if the Corinthian and Ionic columns had a child. So, yeah, that's Greek temples in a nutshell. Of course, each individual temple has its own significance, history, and iteration design, but this video is a decent generalization. It's important to know that throughout the centuries, there were shifts in religious beliefs. Some gods gained popularity and some lost it, and as a result, there were different practices and priorities for each temple. Anyways, thanks for making it this far into the video, hope you learned something new and fun, and if you're interested in this kind of content, let me know in the comments. See you guys in the next video. Bye-bye!